You've been there. A person, maybe it's you, grows quiet at the supper table because they don't feel like they know enough to join the discussion. For all the noise out there, there are still some things you and I don't talk about because the second we try, we feel well outside our wheelhouse. For some, it's sports. For others, it's parenting or gardening. Personally, I don't start a conversation about computer hardware or software. I know I won't be able to hang past the point of generalities, and so I don't try. There are some things we don't talk about because as individuals, we are uncomfortable doing so. The same, I think, could be said of Christ's church. We too go quiet at the supper table. Stem cell research, race in America, gun violence, the definition of religious freedom. While there is no shortage of folks offering their 2 cents worth, we as the one body of Christ not only seem to lack clarity at times, but confidence in our ability to contribute to the discussion. There are issues unique to our time that would have been impossible for people of the first century to anticipate. We can't open the Bible and find where Jesus spoke directly to the hot topics of 2,000 years later. We shouldn't. It is understandable that we grow quiet. But then there's the stuff that is in our scriptures. The casting out of demons, for example, which we don't talk about either. Again, I think it's because the second we try to, we feel like we're swerving, like we're out of our lane. I'll speak for my branch of the Christian family tree. We don't know what to do with Jesus the exorcist, and so we say very little. We keep it nice and vague. Mark doesn't, though. There are 13 healing stories in Mark's gospel. 4 of those are exorcisms. You can use another word for what happens in chapter 1, 5, 7, and 9, but this dimension of Jesus' ministry remains. Jesus, according to Mark, cast out many demons. Now, there is an off-ramp that disciples of today have been known to take, and it looks like attributing this talk of demons to ancient understanding or misunderstanding of disease. We now know the causes of various ailments mentioned in the scriptures. There's no need then to pick up the demon talk and examine it all that carefully, goes this thinking. It's an out. But I wonder about the price we pay for taking it. First of all, people are healed in the Gospels, and there is no mention of demons. So we can't just conflate the two and move on. Secondly, if demon possession was a way that people of the first century talked about evil, what happens when we steer clear of it? I think we do more than shed some unhelpful vocabulary. I think we drop the ball on allowing Jesus to shape the way that we navigate evil. As far back as I can remember, Exorcist was never anything more than the premise of a scary movie, a movie I didn't ever care to watch. I never imagined that as an elder in the United Methodist Church, I would be asked about exorcisms. Had I done one? Could I do one? What did my church believe about them? At least 3 times, I have found myself on the other end of this inquiry. And while I wanted to say, you've got to be kidding me, the people doing the asking weren't kidding at all. I push these sorts of exchanges to the recesses of my mind because on the other side of them, I feel mocked. I feel as though the vocation I share with precious others, clergy and lay, has been toyed with. Someone came looking for an answer to a question that the church wasn't asking, and I didn't like it. A part of me says that these are the moments that you just have to let roll on off. Another part of me says that there is a question behind the question, or at least an underlying statement. If people want to know whether I perform exorcisms, maybe what they're saying is that something terrible has taken hold of someone I know and I'm out of options. Maybe they're asking, can you help this world deal with the evil that is in it? First century Jews and Gentiles came to Jesus with precisely those thoughts. Jesus didn't laugh. He took them seriously. Many times, people believing their loved ones to be afflicted by unclean spirits sought out Jesus for relief. The Gospels say that this was so. Other times, the unclean spirits cried out spontaneously apart from any human request for help. And it's this kind of story Mark tells when he reports. This is the first chapter, verses 21 through 28. They went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, he entered the synagogue and taught. They were astounded at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes. Just then there was in their synagogue a man with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be silent and come out of him." And the unclean spirit, convulsing him and crying with a loud voice, came out of him. They were all amazed, and they kept on asking one another, "What is this? A new teaching with authority. He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." There we have it. Jesus casting out an unclean spirit, God revealing God's self to this crowd by way of an exorcism. I, for one, am suddenly quiet at the supper table. Don't get me wrong, quiet can be an appropriate and humble response. But over time, others may take the silence to mean a lack of integrity. They may see someone talking out of both sides of her mouth, affirming the sciences one day, telling stories about demons the next. Church, it may be time to say something. Not repeat what we said in the medieval times, not quote what the various reformers said a few hundred years later. It may be time to gather around this account of an unclean spirit and interpret it in a way that is not only faithful, but adds to the conversation our world is having with or without us. I'll give it a try. The job is bigger than me, though, so be thinking as I go. What if the stories about demons aren't ultimately stories about demons? Sure, it's intriguing to look into the first century worldviews, how Greeks talked about demons while the Jews spoke of angels and spirits. It's probably important to understand that these distinct views are commingling in the minds of the evangelists and therefore in the stories as they come to us. But what if the New Testament is the wrong place to look? If what we're looking for is an explanation of how demons and or unclean spirits are to blame for our deepest, most treatment-resistant troubles. I'm borrowing from a couple of scholars out of the UK here when I say that the Gospels did not set out to answer the question, what are demons? Demons were a way of picturing the opposition to God, not the only way. Opposition to God was perceived as more centralized and deliberate than the image of a bunch of demons doing their harm of choice suggests. Jesus' exorcisms, including this one in the first chapter of Mark, were about kingdom authority. They still are. To speak of unclean spirits being cast out by the Christ is to speak of how God in the flesh took on the forces at odds with the new creation. Where there was hostility to heavenly intent, where the status quo lashed out at redemption and restoration, Jesus of Nazareth looked at it in the eye. And it, the evil, the hostility, well, it recognized him. It cried out because it didn't want to lose playground space. Friends, forget how we understand it or don't understand it, for a moment anyway. Jesus understood this interaction as a part of what he had been anointed by the Spirit to do, to set at liberty those who were oppressed. His casting out ministry lifted the curtain on the age to come and allowed the people of Galilee to see these forces in unholy cahoots defeated. When Jesus responded to the unclean spirits that cried out in his presence, Mark is betting, or at least hoping, that you and I are going to be taken aback. Who is this that even the demons recognize? What day is it that evil is being brought out of where it has been comfortable for so long? Those are the questions Mark is helping us answer. Who is this? What time is it? This is the Holy One of God, and it's the dawn of a new era. Even the demons see. Which is good news. Good news, first of all, because it assures us that Jesus came to do more than help a few of us find right religion. Jesus came to reclaim for God what is God's own, to touch all of the things that seem beyond our reach or broken beyond repair. Good news because, secondly, if we can take this story with us, this story of evil telling Jesus to mind his own business, we will not be deterred when evil tries to tell us that our place is inside the four walls of a sanctuary, talking only about our favorite hymn and what we wish was on the altar table. Because make no mistake, the powers that be are not interested in us finding something to say at the supper table, particularly if what we say channels the same Spirit that anointed Jesus. It's time to tell the stories of Jesus, whom the unclean spirits obeyed. Not because the world needs us to talk about demons, but because when we know who Jesus is, we'll go where he leads us, out of our wheelhouse, into the age to come.